There's something hauntingly beautiful about the way ancient civilizations spoke to the gods, not with words, but with symbols. Picture this. You're tracing your fingers along the weathered surface of a stone tablet, feeling the grooves of intricate carvings that have survived for millennia. These aren't just random scratches, they're a language of the divine, a secret code left behind by cultures who believed the universe itself could be understood through shapes and signs. From the towering obelisks of Egypt to the sacred temples of the Maya, cryptic symbols were the threads that connected humanity to something greater, something beyond the tangible world. And here's the astonishing part: these symbols weren't unique to one civilization. Across continents and oceans, separated by time and distance, cultures developed strikingly similar sacred signs. What were they trying to tell us? Think about the last time you saw a symbol that made you pause: a religious icon, a national emblem, even a corporate logo. Symbols have power. They bypass logic and speak directly to our subconscious. Now, imagine that power magnified 1,000-fold, infused with the belief that these markings could summon gods, predict the future, or reveal the secrets of creation. That's the world we're about to step into. The ancient Egyptians carved hieroglyphs not just to record history, but to invoke the presence of their deities. The Maya painted glyphs that mapped the movements of the stars, believing the cosmos itself was a divine message waiting to be deciphered. Even in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, priests pressed cuneiform into clay tablets to commune with the heavens. These weren't mere drawings, they were portals. So why does this matter to us today? Because these symbols are more than relics, they're a mirror. They show us how humanity, no matter how far apart, has always searched for meaning in the unseen. Whether it's the spiral of a Celtic knot or the geometric precision of Islamic art, these patterns whisper a universal truth: we've always longed to touch the divine. And that's the journey we're embarking on together. Over the next few minutes, we'll unravel the hidden connections between these sacred symbols, decode their shared language, and maybe, just maybe, catch a glimpse of what the ancients saw when they looked up at the stars. Ready to crack the code? Let's begin. Take the sun disk, that radiant circle with outstretched rays. In Egypt, it was the emblem of Ra, the god who sailed across the sky each day, bringing light and life. Half a world away, the Aztecs worshipped Huitzilopochtli, their sun deity, with nearly identical imagery: a golden orb, often cradled by serpents or adorned with triangular beams. And in Japan, the sun goddess Amaterasu was symbolized by a mirror reflecting that same unbroken circle. How could cultures with no known contact carve the same sacred shape into their temples and artifacts? This isn't just about the sun as a celestial body. It's about how humanity, when faced with the overwhelming mystery of creation, reached for the same visual shorthand to describe the divine. Then there's the serpent. Ancient Egypt's urias coiled on pharaohs' crowns, the Mayas' feathered kukulkan slithering down pyramid steps, even the Norse world serpent Jörmungandr biting its own tail. Across continents, this creature symbolized rebirth, wisdom, and the cyclical nature of existence. In India, cobras sheltered meditating sages. In Australia, the rainbow serpent carved rivers into the land. What's extraordinary is that these cultures didn't just share a symbol, they shared the stories attached to it. The serpent wasn't feared as evil, but revered as a bridge between worlds, a keeper of secrets. Perhaps most mesmerizing is the spiral, carved into Newgrange's stones in Ireland 5,000 years ago, painted in the caves of Malta, woven into Navajo sand art. This winding pattern appears wherever humans sought to understand eternity. It's the shape of galaxies, the curl of ferns unfurling, the path of water swirling down a drain. The spiral doesn't just represent the divine, it mimics the very fabric of reality. And when you find the same symbol in a Celtic brooch and a Hindu mandala, you start to wonder, were our ancestors tapping into something deeper than culture? Something woven into the human mind itself. Archaeologists call this phenomenon convergent symbolism, the idea that similar images emerge independently when faced with universal human experiences. But what if it's more than that? What if these repeating motifs are fragments of a forgotten language, one that spoke not in words but in shapes that resonate with our souls? When a Buddhist monk draws a lotus and an Egyptian priestess offers one to Isis, are they accidentally creating the same art? Or are they both touching the same invisible thread that connects all sacred things? The symbols remain, the gods have gone quiet, but the message might still be waiting for us to decipher it. Egyptian hieroglyphs weren't just letters on a wall, they were living magic. Picture standing in the dim glow of an ancient temple, surrounded by carvings that seem to pulse with energy. The ankh, shaped like a looped cross, wasn't merely a symbol of life, it was a vessel for the breath of the gods, pressed into the hands of pharaohs to grant them immortality. The Eye of Horus, with its stark, geometric lines, wasn't just art, it was a shield against chaos, painted on amulets and carved into tombs to ward off evil. And the scarab beetle, rolling its ball of dung across the sand, became the ultimate metaphor for rebirth, a reminder that even death was just another cycle in the cosmic wheel. But here's what's truly fascinating. These symbols didn't just represent ideas, they were the ideas. When a priest traced the shape of the ankh in the air during a ritual, they weren't just referencing eternal life, they believed they were summoning it into being. Hieroglyphs blurred the line between word and world. Take the Book of the Dead, a guide for souls navigating the afterlife. Every ibis, every serpent, every lotus in its pages wasn't decoration, it was a lifeline. Spell 125, for example, shows the deceased standing before Osiris, their heart weighed against the feather of Maat. The hieroglyphs here aren't just describing the scene, they're activating it, ensuring the soul's safe passage. This belief in the power of symbols extended beyond the temple walls. Even the act of writing a pharaoh's name was sacred. Erase a cartouche, the oval enclosing a ruler's name, and you weren't just vandalizing stone, you were attacking their very existence in the afterlife. That's why enemies of Egypt would deface monuments, chiseling away the names of past kings. To destroy the symbol was to destroy the soul it anchored. And then there's the mystery of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of writing. Legend says he invented hieroglyphs as a gift to humanity, but also as a test. The symbols held such power that they could reveal divine truths, or, if misused, unleash chaos. It's no wonder scribes underwent years of training, learning not just how to carve the signs, but how to wield them. A single misplaced hieroglyph could distort a prayer or curse instead of bless. What's astonishing is how these symbols echo across other cultures. The ankh's loop top finds a cousin in the Celtic talk, a neck ring symbolizing eternity. The Eye of Horus mirrors the protective eye motifs in Hindu and Buddhist art. Even the scarab's rebirth theme resurfaces in the butterfly symbols of Mesoamerica. Were these parallels coincidence or proof of a deeper, shared language of the sacred? The Egyptians might have said it was the gods whispering the same secrets to all of humanity. The Mesopotamians didn't just write, they pressed the divine into existence. Picture a scribe in the dusty courtyard of a ziggurat, his stylus carving wedge-shaped marks into soft clay under the blazing sun. Each indentation was more than a record, it was a direct line to the gods. This was Cuneiform, the world's first known writing system, born not for trade or kings, but to speak to the heavens. The earliest tablets weren't inventories or laws, they were prayers, omens, and celestial diaries. A crack in a sheep's liver, the path of Venus across the night sky, a sudden flood. These weren't just events to the Mesopotamians. They were messages from the gods, and cuneiform was their decoder ring. Take the ziggurats, those towering stairways to the gods. Their bricks weren't just stacked, they were inscribed with symbols calling down deities like Enlil, the storm god whose breath could level cities, or Inanna, the goddess of love and war who held the tablets of destiny. Walk up those steps, and you weren't just climbing, you were passing through a tapestry of sacred signs, each one a key to divine attention. At the summit, priests would perform rituals, reading omens in the stars and etching their findings into clay. These tablets weren't stored away like archives. They were living contracts, proof that humanity had upheld its end of the bargain with the gods. Then there's the mystery of the divine triangles, geometric patterns found on Sumerian seals and temple walls. Some scholars think they encoded sacred mathematics, a hidden language of angles and ratios that mirrored the cosmos. Picture this: a triangle pointing upward might represent aspiration, the human reaching for the divine, while one pointing downward could symbolize the gods' descent to earth. Together, they formed a conversation, a visual prayer etched into the very bones of the city. What's astonishing is how these symbols blurred the line between the earthly and the eternal. A cuneiform tablet of a harvest prayer wasn't just a request, it was a seed planted in the divine realm, expected to grow into favor. The act of writing itself was sacred, a ritual as potent as any sacrifice. Even the stylus was a kind of wand, its wedge-shaped marks conjuring meaning from clay. And when a king's name was written alongside a god's in a treaty, it wasn't just politics, it was a cosmic handshake witnessed by the heavens. But here's the real question: why triangles? Why wedges? Why did these shapes of all possible forms become the vessels for the divine? Maybe it's because they're elemental, the building blocks of everything from temple walls to constellations. Or perhaps, like the Egyptians with their hieroglyphs, the Mesopotamians saw these symbols not as human inventions, but as echoes of a celestial alphabet, one the gods used to write the world into being. Every time a scribe pressed his stylus into clay, he wasn't just recording. He was participating in the oldest magic of all, the belief that the right marks in the right order could bend the ear of the universe. For the Maya, writing wasn't just communication, it was communion. Their glyphs, carved into temple walls and painted onto bark paper, pulsed with a kind of sacred electricity. Take the symbol for Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god. It wasn't merely a depiction, it was an invocation. When a shaman traced those sinuous lines during a ceremony, they weren't just honoring a deity, they were summoning its presence, coaxing the divine to slither from the spirit world into ours. The Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving Maya books, reads like a cosmic instruction manual. Its pages are alive with symbols of eclipses, Venus cycles, and rain-bringing rituals. But here's what's extraordinary: these weren't passive predictions. A glyph showing Chak, the hook-nosed rain god, wasn't just forecasting a storm, it was a plea, a celestial negotiation etched in ink. Priests would use these symbols like a celestial switchboard, aligning their chants and offerings with the rhythms of the codex to pull divine forces into alignment. Then there's the sacred calendar, the Tzolk'in. Each of its 20-day signs wasn't just a date on a page, it was a living entity with its own personality and power. The day Ik, represented by a wind-blown breath glyph, carried the energy of sudden change. The day Ajor, marked by a radiant sun, embodied kingship and destiny. To be born under a certain glyph wasn't just about astrology, It was about your soul being stamped with that day's spiritual signature. But perhaps the most haunting glyphs are those found in burial chambers. A simple square with a spiral inside might look like decoration to us, but to the Maya, it was a literal door. Shamans believed these carvings could dissolve the barrier between worlds, allowing the dead to speak or the living to journey beyond. In the Temple of the Inscriptions at Palenque, Pakal, the great sarcophagus, isn't just covered in glyphs, it's wrapped in them, each one a thread in the net meant to catch his soul as it ascended. What's mesmerizing is how these symbols blur the line between art and act. A glyph of a jaguar wasn't just a picture, it was a vessel for the animal's fierce spirit. A priest wearing a headdress adorned with such symbols didn't just represent the gods, for those moments they became them. That's why Spanish missionaries burned hundreds of these texts, not just to suppress knowledge, but because they recognized the real magic humming in those ink lines. The glyphs weren't just describing the divine, they were breathing it into being, and in quiet chambers across Mesoamerica, you can still feel the echo of that belief, where stone remembers what flesh has forgotten. In the quiet glow of an oil lamp, a Hindu monk traces his finger along the precise lines of the Sri Yantra, a shimmering lattice of interlocking triangles that seems to pulse with hidden energy. This isn't just art, it's a cosmic blueprint, a geometric hymn to the universe's deepest secrets. At its heart, two sets of triangles, one pointing upward, the other down, locked together like divine fingers. The upward ones represent Shiva, the unchanging consciousness, the downward Shakti, the dynamic force of creation. Where they intersect, the entire universe is said to vibrate into being. What's astonishing is how these patterns mirror reality. The Sri Yantra's proportions align with the Fibonacci sequence, the same spiral found in seashells and galaxies. Its central point, the bindu, isn't just a dot. It's the singularity from which all existence unfolds, echoing modern theories of the Big Bang. Temples across India were built using these sacred ratios, their walls humming with mathematical harmony. Step into the Brihadiswara temple, and you're not just walking through stone, you're moving through a yantra made physical, where every pillar's placement and every dome's curve aligns with celestial geometry. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. These designs weren't merely observed, they were experienced. Meditators would focus on the yantra's lines until the shapes seemed to breathe, pulling their awareness into deeper states of consciousness. It's as if the geometry itself was a ladder, each angle a rung leading closer to the divine. Texts like the Tantrasara describe initiates spending years mastering just one yantra, learning to see its hidden layers the way a single triangle might contain entire pantheons of deities, or a dot might hold the sound of the primordial arm. And the magic didn't stop at meditation. Yantras were etched onto metal plates and buried under city foundations, believed to radiate stabilizing energy like spiritual power grids. Warriors carried miniature versions into battle, not as talismans but as conduits for cosmic strength. Even today, in quiet courtyards from Varanasi to Chennai, you'll find priests chanting over copper yantras, their voices weaving through the geometry like threads through a loom. What's haunting is how these symbols whisper across time and culture. The Sri Yantra's interlaced triangles find echoes in the Star of David and the Valknut of Norse mythology. The Mandala's concentric circles mirror Native American medicine wheels and the rose windows of Gothic cathedrals. It's as if humanity, when staring deep enough into the void, always comes back to the same sacred shapes, as though the universe left its fingerprints in our minds. The yantras suggest an unsettling truth. Perhaps mathematics isn't just a language we invented to describe reality. Perhaps it's the language reality itself is speaking. Run your finger along the cool metal of a centuries-old Celtic torque, and you'll feel the ridges of a knot so intricate it seems to defy time itself. These twisting, looping patterns weren't just artistic flourishes, they were sacred diagrams of the universe's hidden architecture. Picture a druid in a misty grove, tracing the endless path of a knotwork design with his staff while chanting prayers to the gods. Every curve was deliberate, every intersection meaningful. The knots had no beginning and no end because, to the Celts, neither did the divine. Take the famous Triskelion 3 spirals flowing outward from a single point. On the surface, it's just an elegant wall of lines, but in the hands of a Celtic priest, it became a living map of existence. The first spiral represented birth and spring's vibrant energy. The second stood for the fullness of life, the summer's golden abundance, and the third, that was the journey into the afterlife, winter's quiet wisdom before the cycle began anew. Carved into standing stones across Ireland and Scotland, this symbol didn't just describe the cycle of life, it invoked its power. Farmers would touch these carvings before planting, warriors before battle, mothers before childbirth. The stone held the pattern, and the pattern held the promise that all endings were just preparations for new beginnings. Then there's the shield knot, its tight, interlocking strands forming an impenetrable barrier. Found on armor, doorways, and even children's cradles, this design wasn't merely decorative, it was active spiritual armor. The Celts believed evil couldn't cross a line that never ended, so these knots became traps for malevolent forces. A traveler might scratch one into the dirt before sleeping under the stars, creating a sacred perimeter no dark spirit could breach. The same logic applied to love charms, where intertwined knots symbolized bonds no force could unravel. What's astonishing is how these symbols blurred the line between art and algebra. The Book of Kells, that masterpiece of medieval illumination, hides mathematical secrets in its knotwork. Certain patterns repeat at ratios matching the golden mean, the same proportions found in sunflowers and spiral galaxies. Were the monks who painted these pages preserving an ancient druidic science, a way of encoding cosmic truths in ink and vellum? The precision suggests these designs weren't just inspired, they were calculated, as if the scribes were transcribing a divine equation. Perhaps most haunting are the knots that adorn burial sites. A single unbroken loop carved on a tombstone wasn't just a memorial, it was a compass, guiding the soul through the otherworld's tangled paths. The Celts saw death as a transformation, not an end, and their knots mirrored this belief. Just as the designs wove seamlessly from one strand to another, so too did they believe the soul would transition from this world to the next. Modern archaeologists have found these symbols etched not just in stone, but on the undersides of altars and the backs of mirrors, places where only the gods would see them. The eerie beauty of Celtic knots lies in their paradox. They're impossibly complex, yet built from just one unbroken line. That tension between simplicity and sophistication mirrors humanity's own relationship with the divine. We grasp at eternity with finite minds, trying to map the infinite with ink and metal. And somehow, in those tangled threads of silver and stone, the Celts came closer than most. Their knots whisper across centuries, reminding us that every ending is a fold in a much larger pattern, one we're still learning to read. The Vikings didn't just carve runes, they carved fate itself. Imagine a warrior gripping his sword before battle, his fingers brushing over the runes etched into the blade. To him, these weren't mere letters, they were whispers from Odin, the All-Father, who'd hung from the world tree for 9 nights to steal the secrets of the runes and gift them to humanity. Each symbol pulsed with its own power answers, shaped like a branching tree, could unlock eloquence or divine messages, while Thurisaz, a thorn-like mark, bristled with protective energy. But here's what's chilling. The Vikings believed that to carve a rune was to summon its power. A rune master wouldn't just write protection on a shield. He'd carve Thurisaz with deliberate strokes, chanting spells to awaken its latent magic. The act of carving was a pact, a way to bend the threads of destiny. Consider the Elder Futhark, the oldest runic alphabet. Its 24 symbols weren't arranged randomly. They were a roadmap of cosmic forces. Fehu, the first rune, resembled cattle horns, a symbol of wealth and raw energy. But twist it slightly, pair it with other runes, and suddenly it wasn't just about material riches. It could channel the fertile chaos of creation. That's why rune stones weren't left lying around like scrap paper. A single misplaced symbol could curse a harvest or sour a marriage. Vikings would bury rune-carved amulets under doorways to guard homes, or slip them into birthing chambers to ensure safe deliveries. Even love spells took the form of bind runes, intertwined symbols like Jibo, the gift rune, and Berkana, the birch rune, symbolizing growth, fused together to weave two lives into one. The most haunting examples, rune stones raised for the dead. A Viking wouldn't just inscribe a name, they'd carve a prayer in runes, often with eerie precision. The Rök stone in Sweden, covered in nearly 800 runes, doesn't just memorialize a fallen sun, it tells a riddle about the end of the world, a warning etched in stone to echo through the ages. Some scholars believe these stones weren't just markers but portals, the runes acting as a kind of spiritual address, guiding the deceased to the right realm in the afterlife. But runes weren't just for the elite. Everyday objects, combs, cooking pots, even fishing nets bore these marks. A fisherman might scratch lagars, the water rune, onto his oar to calm stormy seas. A mother would carve Sowilo, the sun rune, onto a child's toy to ward off sickness. This wasn't superstition, it was a living dialogue with the unseen. The Vikings saw the world as a tapestry of hidden forces, and runes were the needles they used to stitch their will into the fabric of reality. What's mesmerizing is how these symbols echo across other traditions. The rune alges, with its upward-reaching lines, mirrors the Egyptian ankh as a sign of divine connection. The spiral of Ingwaz, symbolizing fertility, finds its twin in Celtic knotwork. It's as if when humanity digs deep enough into the sacred, we all hit the same underground river, a current of shapes that mean more than we can say. The runes whisper a truth the Vikings knew well. Writing isn't just about recording words. Sometimes it's about rewriting the world. Beneath the scorching sun of southeastern Turkey, the stones of Göbekli Tepe whisper secrets 12,000 years old. These towering T-shaped pillars, carved when humans were still nomadic hunter-gatherers, shouldn't exist, yet here they stand, adorned with symbols that defy easy explanation. A serpent slithers up one megalith, its scales meticulously detailed. On another, a scorpion raises its tail in warning. Abstract shapes, H-like figures, crescent moons, clusters of dots form patterns that feel almost like language. This wasn't just decoration. These carvings were a dialogue with the unseen, etched by people who saw the sacred in every shadow and star. What's staggering isn't just the age of these symbols, but what they reveal about human consciousness. Göbekli Tepe predates agriculture, metal tools, even pottery. Its builders hadn't yet settled into villages, yet they hauled 20-ton stones across miles, raising pillars to something beyond survival. The scorpion isn't just a creature, it's a constellation. The serpent mirrors the Milky Way's winding path across the night sky. Archaeologists like Klaus Schmidt noticed how these carvings align with celestial patterns, suggesting the world's first temple might also have been its first observatory. Imagine standing there at dawn, watching sunlight slide across the pillars until it illuminates just one carving, a signal, a sacred calendar, a god's fingerprint in stone. Then there are the hauntingly abstract symbols, circles within circles, zigzag lines, grids that resemble nothing in nature. Some researchers see these as early attempts to map the cosmos, a prehistoric star chart carved in relief. Others believe they're ritual notations, marking solstices or lunar cycles crucial for survival. But here's the spine-tingling part. Similar symbols appear in caves across Europe and Asia, drawn millennia apart by cultures who couldn't have met. A spiral in Göbekli Tepe mirrors one in Newgrange. A cluster of dots matches cave paintings in France. It's as if these shapes were part of humanity's shared spiritual vocabulary long before words existed. The vulture stone tells the most compelling story. Its surface swirls with creatures, birds, insects, a headless human arranged in what looks like chaos. But tilt it toward the sky and a pattern emerges. The animals align with constellations as they appeared around 10,900 BC. The scorpion sits where Scorpio would have been. The vulture mirrors Sagittarius. Most chilling is the carving of a fox, positioned exactly where the sun would have risen during the summer solstice. This wasn't random art. It was a celestial snapshot, frozen in stone to mark a date of cosmic significance. Some theorists believe it records a cataclysmic event, like a comet strike that triggered the Younger Dryas cooling period. Others see it as a memorial to lost gods or a warning carved across generations. What's undeniable is that Göbekli Tepe's symbols challenge everything we thought we knew about early humans. These carvings prove that spirituality, the urge to reach beyond the visible world, didn't emerge after settled life, but drove it. The temple's pillars weren't just walls, they were canvases for a sacred code, one that connected earth to sky, hunter to harvest, mortality to eternity. And though we may never fully crack their meaning, the stones keep whispering. In their curves and lines, we catch glimpses of the moment humanity first looked up at the stars and realized they were speaking back. Imagine the heat of a Bronze Age fire, the acrid scent of burning bone, and the tense silence as a Shang dynasty priest leans closer waiting for the crack. This was divination in ancient China, a sacred conversation etched in symbols. Oracle bones, often the shoulder blades of oxen or the plastrons of turtles, weren't just writing surfaces, they were bridges to the gods. A priest would carve a question into the bone: will the harvest flourish? Should the king march to war? Then press a hot rod into the grooves. The resulting fractures weren't random. Like celestial Morse code, their patterns held the gods' replies, interpreted by those who knew how to read the divine handwriting. What's astonishing is how these symbols birthed a language. The characters scratched onto oracle bones, angular, stark, evolved into modern Chinese script, but in their infancy, they weren't just letters, they were conduits. The character for rain didn't just describe precipitation, it invoked the Dragon King's favor. The symbol for king wasn't a title, it was a lightning rod for celestial authority. Even the act of carving was ritual. Priests used bronze tools forged in ceremonies, their chisels consecrated to ensure every stroke carried spiritual weight. A single misplaced line could distort a god's answer, so scribes trained for years, their hands guided by generations of sacred tradition. Then there's the Bogwa, those 8 trigrams of stacked lines that still adorn Taoist temples today. To the untrained eye, they're just broken and unbroken strokes, but to a Shang dynasty mystic, they mapped the universe's pulse. Kian, 3 solid lines, represented heaven's unyielding strength. Kun, 3 broken lines, embodied Earth's receptive grace. Together, they spun a cosmic dance predicting floods, guiding city layouts, even determining auspicious dates for weddings. The Bogwa wasn't philosophy, it was firmware for the divine operating system, a code that balanced yin and yang in every facet of life. Dragon motifs took this further. Unlike Western dragons, hoarders, destroyers, the Chinese lung was a celestial architect. Its sinuous form, often etched into bronze vessels, wasn't decoration, it was an antenna. When a ritual wine cup bore dragon symbols, it wasn't just holding liquid, it was channeling the creature's power to purify, to bless, to connect earth with the heavens. Emperors wore robes embroidered with 5-clawed dragons, not just to display rank, but to align themselves with the cosmic order, to where the symbol was to borrow its essence. But here's what lingers: these bones weren't archived, they were recycled. After a divination, many were ground into powder for medicinal potions, a literal ingestion of the divine. A king might drink his own answered prayers in a tonic, blurring the line between message and medium. That's the heart of it. To the Shang, symbols weren't separate from the sacred. They were the sacred, as tangible as bone, as potent as fire. When modern scholars painstakingly decode these ancient cracks, they're not just translating words. They're eavesdropping on whispers between earth and eternity. The alchemist's workshop was a theater of symbols, a place where lead and gold weren't just elements, but metaphors for the human soul's potential. Take the Ouroboros, that ancient serpent swallowing its own tail. At first glance, it's a simple circle of scales and fangs, but to an alchemist like Zosimos of Panopolis, it was the ultimate paradox: destruction feeding creation, endings birthing beginnings. This wasn't just a fancy drawing in the margin of some old manuscript. It was a mirror held up to the universe, reflecting the truth that everything, metals, planets, even human consciousness, cycled through stages of decay and renewal. Then there's the caduceus, twin serpents winding around a staff. Most recognize it as a medical symbol today, but its roots coil deeper into alchemical soil. The serpents represented opposing forces: mercury and sulfur, fluidity and solidity locked in eternal dance. Their intersection points weren't just knots, they were moments of transformation where base elements could leap into higher states. Alchemists saw this same pattern everywhere, in the veins of leaves, the double helix of DNA before science named it, even the spinal column with its coiled energy. Symbols weren't separate from nature, they were its hidden blueprints. Consider the sun and moon glyphs, those stark circles with dot centers and crescent curves. Medieval manuscripts depict them as king and queen, their union producing the chemical wedding, a fusion of solar vitality and lunar intuition. But here's the twist: these weren't just celestial bodies. The sun symbol often concealed a code for gold's atomic structure, while the moon's crescent hinted at silver's reflective properties. When an alchemist drew them side by side, they weren't sketching astronomy. They were mapping the marriage of logic and imagination needed to unlock matter's secrets. The most tantalizing symbol of all, the green lion devouring the sun. This vivid image appears in texts like the Rosarium Philosophorum, where an emerald-hued beast appears to consume the solar disk. To modern eyes, it's surreal art. To alchemists, it was literal chemistry. The lion represented raw, unrefined antimony ore, while the sun stood for gold. The process of purifying antimony to create the mythical philosopher's stone was visualized as this fantastical feast. But peel back another layer, and the green lion becomes the human ego, its relentless hunger for control dissolving in the light of higher wisdom. What's haunting is how these symbols transcend time. The Ouroboros slithers through Egyptian tombs and Norse myths before curling up in alchemy labs. The sun and moon duality echoes in Taoist yin-yang and Hindu Ardhanarishvara. It's as if these shapes are less invented than discovered, archetypes buried in the collective human psyche, waiting for each generation to unearth them anew. The alchemists knew something we often forget: symbols aren't just what we see, They're how we see, and sometimes in the right light, they become the ladder between Earth and stars. High on the sun-baked cliffs of the American Southwest, a spiral petroglyph catches the light, not just a carving but a portal. To the Hopi people, this symbol wasn't merely art, it was a map of their epic migration, a sacred breadcrumb trail left by ancestors who followed the stars to their promised land. Each twist in the spiral marked a resting place, a trial overcome, a covenant with the divine. Nearby, the stark outline of a thunderbird stretches its wings across the stone, not just a bird, but a living bolt of celestial power, capable of summoning storms with a single beat of its feathers. These petroglyphs weren't etched for decoration. They were prayers in stone, left by hands that believed symbols could hold the weight of the sacred. Step closer to these rock faces and something strange happens. At sites like Newspaper Rock in Utah or the Petroglyph National Monument in New Mexico, visitors report a tingling sensation, as if the carvings hum with residual energy. Tribal elders speak of places where the symbols still work, or where a shaman's touch on the right glyph at the right time can summon rain or heal sickness. The Zuni people tell of handprint petroglyphs that glow faintly under moonlight, said to be the signatures of spirits who crossed into this world to share wisdom. Skeptics call it suggestion or geological oddities, but those who have felt it know better. These stones remember, the symbols themselves are a language beyond words. A zigzag line might seem simple, but to the Navajo, it's the path of lightning, a conductor between earth and sky. A series of dots could map constellations or trace the footsteps of a hero's journey in a story older than written language. Even the act of carving was ritual. Tools weren't just tools, they were extensions of the carver's intent, often blessed with pollen or songs before striking stone. The rock itself was chosen for its resonance. Certain cliffs were known as singing rocks, their mineral content amplifying spiritual vibrations. Perhaps most haunting are the glyphs that defy modern interpretation. Deep in Canyonlands National Park, a figure with antlers and elongated limbs stands frozen mid-dance. Is it a shaman in trance, a deity from the underworld? Nearby, a cluster of concentric circles pulses like ripples in a pond. Some say they're portals, others claim they're warnings. What's undeniable is their power to unsettle. Archaeologists have documented petroglyphs that change subtly over centuries, as if the stones themselves are slowly rewriting the message. The brilliance of these symbols lies in their duality. A single carving could be a historical record, a celestial map, and a living prayer all at once. The Hopi migration glyphs, for example, don't just point to physical locations, they chart the soul's journey through cycles of existence. The Thunderbird isn't merely a weather symbol. It's a reminder that the divine speaks through thunder, that reverence is the price of protection. Unlike modern writing, which separates the sacred from the mundane, these petroglyphs blur the lines. To carve was to commune, to touch was to remember, and to stand before them today is to feel the echo of a truth we've almost forgotten, that symbols aren't just what we make. They're how the world makes itself known. The mandala begins with a single dot, a universe in potential, waiting to unfold. Tibetan monks trace concentric circles outward from this center, their colored sands sifting through metal funnels to form intricate geometries that bloom like sacred flowers. Each hue is deliberate, blue for wisdom, white for space, red for life force. The mandala isn't just art, it's a living equation, a cosmic clockwork where every line and curve mirrors the structure of reality itself. For weeks, the monks bend over their creation, their chants vibrating through the grains as they build palaces of symbolism, gates representing the four directions, lotus petals embodying spiritual awakening, fierce deities guarding the periphery against distraction. The Kalachakra mandala, one of the most complex, is a spiral of interconnected temples and deities, each level corresponding to cycles of time, from the breath in your lungs to the turning of galaxies. But here's what stops the heart. Once completed, the mandala is swept away in a ritual dissolution. The monks gather the sands, each particle now charged with prayers, and release them into flowing water, carrying blessings to the world. This act isn't destruction, it's the final lesson. The mandala's beauty lies in its ephemerality, a reminder that even the most perfect forms are fleeting. In a culture where symbols are portals to the divine, the act of letting go becomes the highest form of worship. What's mesmerizing is how these designs echo across traditions. The rose windows of medieval cathedrals, with their radiating spokes of colored glass, functioned similarly, filtering sunlight into sacred geometry that lifted gazes heavenward. Navajo sand paintings used in healing ceremonies share the same fate as Tibetan mandalas, created with precision, then scattered to restore balance. Even the human eye finds solace in these patterns. Studies show mandalas reduce stress, as if their symmetry speaks to some deep wiring in our brains. The genius of the mandala is its duality. To the uninitiated, it's a stunning mosaic. To the practitioner, it's a ladder. Meditators visualize traversing its pathways, moving from outer chaos to inner stillness, symbol by symbol. The outer square becomes a temple gate. The rings of fire transform into barriers against illusion. At the center, where all lines converge, the meditator encounters not emptiness but the infinite. In this way, the mandala isn't just a map of the cosmos. It's a mirror reflecting the order hidden within our own minds. Perhaps that's why these symbols endure. In a world of noise and fragmentation, the mandala whispers an ancient secret. Chaos is an illusion. Beneath the surface, there's always a pattern, a rhythm, a dance of energies waiting to be recognized. And when we learn to see it, even for a moment, we touch the same truth those monks honor with every grain of sand. In the shadowy catacombs beneath Rome, a simple fish symbol scratched into stone could mean the difference between life and death. The ichthys, two intersecting arcs forming a fish, was more than code for persecuted Christians. It was a theological compass. Each letter of the Greek word for fish, iota chi theta upsilon sigma, stood for a sacred truth: Jesus Christ, God's Son, Savior. To draw this symbol was to whisper the entire gospel in a single stroke. But the power went deeper. Early believers saw the fish as a reminder of the miracle of loaves and fishes, of baptismal waters, even of Christ calling his disciples to become fishers of men. A baker might press the ichthys into bread dough before baking, turning daily sustenance into communion. A merchant could trace it in the dirt to identify safe houses. This wasn't just survival, it was sacrament hidden in plain sight. The cross we recognize today, bold, symmetrical, was rare in Christianity's first centuries. Instead, believers favored the anchor cross, its curved base resembling a ship's anchor. To outsiders, it looked like maritime decor. To initiates, it symbolized hope's unshakable grip on the soul, echoing Hebrews 6:19. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. Even the familiar Latin cross carried layered meanings. The vertical beam reached from earth to heaven. The horizontal stretched across time and space. Where they intersected was the axis of salvation. Soldiers returning from the Crusades brought back stories of the Jerusalem cross, its four smaller crosses representing the spread of the gospel to the four corners of the earth. Every variation held multitudes. Then there's the Lamb curled atop an open book with a banner reading, Ex Agnus Dei, Behold the Lamb of God. Medieval artisans would gild these figures for altar pieces, knowing the symbol worked on three levels: Christ's sacrifice as the paschal lamb, his innocence as the silent lamb led to slaughter, and his triumph as the apocalyptic lamb who conquers death. In illuminated manuscripts, the lamb often stands on Mount Zion, its blood streaming into chalices, a graphic reminder that this wasn't just metaphor, but mystical reality. Stained glass transformed sunlight into scripture. At Chartres Cathedral, the famous blue Virgin window isn't just a portrait of Mary, it's a cascade of cobalt and crimson telling her story through symbols. Lilies for purity, towers for her immovable faith, stars recalling the woman of the apocalypse crowned with 12 stars. The glass itself was alchemy. Artisans added cobalt oxide to molten sand, creating a blue so vivid it was said to contain fragments of heaven. When light poured through these windows, it didn't just illuminate the nave, it painted the congregation in living theology, turning worshippers into walking canvases of sacred light. Perhaps most poignant are the hidden symbols: the pelican piercing her own breast to feed her young with her blood, foreshadowing the Eucharist, the phoenix rising from flames as promise of resurrection. Even the humble pomegranate, bursting with seeds, whispered of Christ suffering, each ruby arrow like a drop of blood. The tuft rind his tomb that couldn't contain the abundance of new life. These images weren't illustrations, they were invitations to see the divine woven into the fabric of creation. A medieval peasant might never read the Bible, but they could read the tympanum over the church door, where every creature and vine told the story of redemption. The genius of Christian iconography lies in its elasticity, the way a single symbol could hold both childlike simplicity and doctoral-level theology. A dove could be Noah's olive branch at one glance, the Holy Spirit at another, and the soul taking flight at death with the next. This visual language wasn't just decorative, it was transformative. To meditate on these symbols was to let them rearrange your inner world, imprinting truth deeper than words could reach. And in that quiet imprint, something remarkable happened. The ordinary became sacramental, and the faithful found themselves standing at the intersection of time and eternity. Buried in the ashes of a Minoan palace on Crete, the Phaistos Disc sits silent, its secrets pressed into clay for over 3,000 years. Picture this: a palm-sized disc, fired smooth, covered on both sides with spiraling symbols that look like tiny men, birds, axes, and flowers. 45 distinct pictographs repeat in groups, stamped rather than carved, as if mass-produced for some urgent purpose. But here's the twist: no one knows what it says. Not a single matching text has ever been found. This isn't just a puzzle, it's a ghost language, a whisper from a lost ritual that modern scholars strain to hear. The symbols themselves are tantalizingly familiar yet alien. A helmeted head could be a warrior or a god. A fish might represent Poseidon's domain or a fertility charm. The disc's spiral arrangement suggests motion, perhaps a hymn to be sung, a prayer to be spun like thread. Some researchers hear echoes of Linear A, the undeciphered script of the Minoans, in these shapes. Others argue the symbols are purely religious, meant to be read not with the mind but with the body, a guide for ceremonial dance or trance. The repeating sequences hint at refrains, like verses in a sacred song frozen in clay. What's haunting is how the disc defies context. Most ancient scripts leave breadcrumbs: royal decrees, temple inventories, love poems. But this object stands alone, unearthed in a palace basement with no translation key, no parallel artifacts. Even its creation method baffles. Each symbol was pressed into the clay with a seal, making this the earliest known example of movable type, predating Gutenberg by millennia. Was it a prayer wheel, a royal decree, a magical incantation to calm earthquakes or summon the mother goddess? The Minoans left no answers, only the disc's eerie symmetry, its symbols locking together like gears in a divine machine. Modern attempts to crack the code read like detective fiction. Cryptographers have tried frequency analysis, treating it like a cipher. Linguists hunt for patterns resembling known languages from Hittite to Luwian. One theory suggests the outer spiral represents the solar year, with symbols marking agricultural cycles. Another claims it's a board game, the Minoan equivalent of snakes and ladders. But the most compelling theories circle back to ritual. The disc was found near a temple complex, its symbols echoing motifs found on Minoan altars: bees for priestesses, shields for protection, lilies for the afterlife. Perhaps it wasn't meant to be read at all, but touched, a tactile oracle where fingers traced symbols to invoke blessings. The Phaistos Disc's true power lies in its silence. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Maya glyphs, its language remains stubbornly opaque, reminding us that not all doors to the past can be unlocked. Every undeciphered symbol is a mirror reflecting our own longing to hear voices swallowed by time. Yet in that mystery there's a strange comfort. Some truths were never meant for translation. They hum in the clay, waiting for the right hand, the right moment to wake them. Aztec scribes didn't just paint glyphs, they bled them into being. Dip a brush into vibrant pigments made from crushed insects, minerals, and even precious stones, and you're not just creating art, you're channeling the gods themselves. The Borgia Codex, one of the few surviving Aztec manuscripts, pulses with color-coded divinity. Tezcatlipoca's stripe of black war paint smeared across the night sky. Quetzalcoatl's emerald plumes coiled around the breath of life. Xipe-Totec's flayed skin rendered in lurid gold. Every hue was a prayer, every line a lifeline to the sacred. Take the Olan symbol, that four-armed spiral radiating motion like a celestial whirlpool. To modern eyes, it's an abstract design, but to an Aztec priest, it was the heartbeat of existence. Carved into temple floors, it marked where dancers would spin to mimic the sun's journey, each rotation fueling Tenochtitlan's fiery ascent. Woven into warriors' shields, it became a vortex of battle energy, transforming combat into cosmic choreography. The Olan wasn't just about movement, it was the sacred tremor that kept the fifth sun from collapsing into eternal night. Then there were the feathers, not just decorations but divine text. An eagle's downy plume wasn't merely beautiful, it carried the voice of Huitzilopochtli himself. Priests would bundle them into staffs called Tlahuistli, their rustling interpreted as prophecies. A Quetzal feather's iridescence, that was the sheen of creative power, so potent that wearing them without royal permission was punishable by death. The Codex Mendoza shows tribute lists where feathers outrank gold because what's metal compared to fragments of the sky's own language. But the most visceral glyphs were those painted in shades of red. Blood Chalchihuatl wasn't just a substance to the Aztecs, it was the ink of the cosmos. Glyphs shaped like droplets or spurting arteries didn't just depict sacrifice, they enacted it. When a priest sliced his earlobe during a ceremony, letting crimson fall onto bark paper, those stains became living symbols. They didn't represent life, they were life, given willingly to nourish the gods who sustained existence. The famous calendar stone isn't just a timekeeper, it's a bleeding wound at the center of reality, with Tenochtitlan's tongue lolling as a flint knife, eternally thirsty. What's chilling is how these symbols blurred the line between metaphor and material. A glyph of a heart wasn't an illustration, it was a vessel. During the feast of Tlahuistli, victims' hearts were placed on carved stone glyphs, their pulse syncing with the rhythm of chants until the moment of extraction. The stone absorbed the sacrifice, the glyphs beneath shimmering with fresh vitality. Even everyday objects carried this weight. A potter shaping a vessel would press glyphs into the clay, not for decoration, but because without those sacred marks, water might forget how to quench. The genius of Aztec symbolism lies in its unbearable immediacy. These weren't distant metaphors, they were wires humming with divine current. When a scribe painted a glyph of rain, they weren't hoping for Tlaloc's favor, they were twisting the god's arm. Every symbol was a contract, a threat, a love letter to forces that could erase the world with a thought. And perhaps that's why so few codices survived the Spanish conquest, not just because they were burned as heresy, but because the conquerors sensed the awful truth. These weren't books, they were living entities, their glyphs still whispering to gods who might yet answer. In the hushed chambers where Kabbalists sought the face of the divine, parchment glowed with a diagram that mapped eternity, the tree of life. Not a tree as we know it, but a constellation of 10 luminous spheres called Sephirot, each a facet of God's infinite nature. Picture them as vessels, Keter, the crown of pure will, hovering at the summit like a silent lightning strike. Below it, Chokmah and Binah, wisdom and understanding, form the primal parents of creation, their interplay sparking the universe into being. And down the trunk they flow, through mercy and judgment, beauty and endurance, until they reach Malkuth, the kingdom, our material world, where divine energy finally crystallizes into matter. But here's what's astonishing. These spheres aren't just static points. They're connected by 22 paths, each corresponding to a Hebrew letter and a spiritual initiation. To walk these paths wasn't metaphorical. Kabbalists believed the soul could actually ascend, letter by letter, toward enlightenment. Consider the letter Aleph, linking Keter to Chokmah. Its shape, 2 yards cradling a diagonal line, mirrors the balance between divine wisdom and human receptivity. Meditating on this symbol wasn't an intellectual exercise, it was an alchemical process, reshaping the practitioner's consciousness to hold higher truth. Then there's the fiery path of Shin, winding between Hod and Netzach, its 3 tongues of flame representing the trials that purify ambition into true service. Even the gaps between Sephirot held meaning, the veils of negative existence, where God's presence withdraws to make space for creation. Every curve and void in this diagram was a dialogue between the finite and infinite. Practical Kabbalah took this further. Masters would visualize the tree overlaid on their own bodies, aligning each sephirah with limbs and organs. Jevurah's severity in the left arm, Chiz's mercy in the right. A prayer wasn't just words, it was energy moving up and down this inner ladder, drawing down light to heal or protect. The Zohar, Kabbalah's central text, describes adepts who could see the tree shimmering around others, a luminous diagnosis of spiritual health. A blockage in Yesod, the foundation, might manifest as creative stagnation. An overactive Jevurah could signal destructive rigidity. What's haunting is how these symbols echo beyond Judaism. The Sephirot structure mirrors the chakra system of Hinduism, the Sephirot's flow of divine energy finding cousins in Taoist meridians, and even the Christian mystic's ascent through purgation, illumination, and union. The Tree of Life isn't just a map, it's a mirror reflecting the universal human urge to chart the unchartable. And in its branches, we glimpse a daring truth. Perhaps the divine isn't beyond understanding, but coded into the very symbols we've used to reach for it all along. The labyrinth's coiled path isn't just a pattern, it's an invitation to walk with your feet what the soul already knows. Picture the stone floors of Chartres Cathedral, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims shuffling along its 11-circuit design. Each turn, each deliberate step wasn't about reaching the center quickly. It was about surrendering to the journey itself. Unlike mazes which taunt with dead ends and false choices, labyrinths offer a single, unwavering route. That's the first clue to their power. They mirror life's inevitable arc, where every twist, whether joyful or agonizing, leads ultimately towards sacred union. Crete's ancient labyrinth, mythically home to the Minotaur, reveals the symbol's darker duality. Here, the path wasn't just meditation, it was confrontation. To walk it was to face the beast within, the shadowy corners of the self that must be traversed before transformation. Yet even this monstrous version held redemption. Ariadne's thread, that slender lifeline, became the original way out, proof that divine guidance threads through even the most terrifying passages. Medieval monks took this further, embedding labyrinths into cloister gardens. Tracing their curves became a form of mobile prayer, the body's movement synchronizing with the mind's ascent. Some designs, like the Ravenna labyrinth, divided the path into 7 rings echoing the 7 planetary spheres of medieval cosmology. A pilgrim walking it didn't just move forward, they ascended symbolically through the heavens with each circuit. The center, that was the Empyrean, the dwelling place of God, where all spirals finally stilled. Modern seekers still feel the pull. At California's Grace Cathedral, visitors remove their shoes before entering the labyrinth, their bare feet connecting to something older than thought. Cancer patients walk hospital labyrinths as tactile therapy, their fingers grazing raised brass paths when their legs grow weak. There's science behind it. The bilateral stimulation of walking a labyrinth switchbacks activates both brain hemispheres, creating a state akin to deep meditation. But the ancients didn't need fMRI scans to understand. They knew the body remembers what the mind forgets, that sometimes truth isn't grasped but walked. What's haunting is how these designs transcend culture. The Tohono O'odham peoples, man in the maze, symbol mirrors Charter's twists, teaching that life's challenges are meant to be met, not avoided. Tibetan Buddhists create sand mandalas with labyrinthine paths, destroyed upon completion as a lesson in impermanence. Even children instinctively trace spirals in the dirt, as if the shape is etched into our nervous system. The labyrinth whispers a secret. Enlightenment isn't about escaping the path, it's about surrendering to its every sacred turn. The cloth whispers before the wearer speaks. That's the power of Adinkra symbols. Among the Akan people of Ghana, these intricate designs aren't merely decorations. They're divine philosophy pressed onto fabric. Picture an artisan dipping a carved calabash stamp into dark dye, pressing it rhythmically onto cotton, each imprint a sacred seal, each pattern a conversation with the gods. Take Jainayam, the symbol of a spiraling sun with crescent moons. Its name means except for God, a declaration that no earthly power surpasses the divine. This isn't just a motif, it's a wearable prayer, a reminder that every human endeavor unfolds under celestial gaze. Then there's Sankofa, the bird twisting its neck to pluck an egg from its own back. At first glance, it's a striking visual, but the lesson cuts deeper. Return and fetch it. The past isn't a shadow to outrun, but a tool to reclaim. Akan elders teach this symbol to children not through lectures, but by wrapping them in cloth adorned with Sankofa during storytelling nights. The fabric becomes a tactile lesson. History isn't trapped in books. It's stitched into the very garments that shield you from the world. But Adinkra's brilliance lies in its duality. Dwenemen, the ram's horns, curves with both strength and humility. The ram fights fiercely but kneels to drink, a paradox carved into cloth for leaders to wear during councils. Similarly, Fawohodi, the independent symbol resembling a broken chain, isn't just about freedom. Its delicate loops warn that liberation without responsibility is a necklace with no clasp. These symbols don't simplify wisdom, they hold its tensions, teaching that truth often wears 2 faces. The process of creating Adinkra cloth is ritual as much as craft. The dyes, boiled from bark, carry the bitterness of ancestral trials. The stamps, carved by hand, must be blessed before use. A misaligned symbol could distort its sacred message. When a bride wears enconson, the linked chain pattern on her wedding cloth, she's not just celebrating union, she's invoking the unbroken thread connecting all living things. Even mourning cloths stamped with Ouo Atwadi, the ladder of death, transform grief into pedagogy. The symbol whispers that passing from this world is merely climbing toward another dawn. What's haunting is how these designs transcend their origins. The Akoma, a stylized heart, appears in Caribbean carnival costumes and African American quilts, a diaspora's silent homage to resilience. Modern architects etch empatapo, the knot of reconciliation, into courthouse walls, turning stone into peacemaker. The symbols endure because they refuse to be mere artifacts. They're living scripts, adapting without losing their soul. When a Ghanaian teenager tattoos E's knee tekrama, the teeth and tongue, on their wrist, a symbol of interdependence, they're not decorating skin. They're inscribing a covenant that even the sharpest words must work in harmony, just as teeth and tongue share a mouth yet never draw blood. The genius of Adinkra is its quiet rebellion. Colonial powers burned texts, banned languages, but they couldn't erase symbols woven into the fabric of daily life. A farmer wearing ensoroma, the star child symbol, wasn't just clad in cloth. He carried a cosmos on his back, proof that some truths are too vast to burn. Today, as neuroscientists study how symbols bypass logic to imprint directly on memory, the Akan ancestors nod knowingly. They understood what we're still learning, that wisdom isn't always spoken. Sometimes it's stamped in ink, worn close to the skin, waiting for the right moment to speak. The Vessica Piscis isn't just a shape, it's a sacred threshold, a geometric doorway where worlds collide. Picture two perfect circles overlapping just enough to create that almond-shaped center, the space where divine and mortal realms brush against each other. Early Christian artists placed Christ within this very form, his body framed by the mandorla Italian for almond, as if emerging from the intersection of infinite and finite. But the magic doesn't stop there. Hindu temples embed the same shape in their garbhagriha, the innermost sanctum where deity statues reside, symbolizing the womb of creation. Even the pagan goddess imagery of ancient Europe often showed figures standing within this luminous oval, a visual echo across faiths that suggests a shared understanding of sacred geometry's power. What's astonishing is how precisely this shape encodes cosmic mathematics. The height-to-width ratio of the Vessica Piscis is the square root of 3, approximately 1.732, a proportion that resonates through nature, from the branching patterns of trees to the structure of crystals. Medieval architects knew this instinctively. Walk into Chartres Cathedral, and you'll find the Vessica Piscis governing the rose windows' dimensions, their stained glass filtering sunlight into geometric hymns. Gothic arches, they're just Vessica Piscis curves stacked vertically, turning entire naves into stone embodiments of celestial harmony. The architects weren't just building, they were composing silent music in stone, with this shape as their fundamental note. The symbol's name, Latin for bladder of a fish, hints at its deeper layers. Early Christians used it as a covert identifier, drawing simple fish outlines that secretly contained this sacred overlap. But the fish connection swims deeper. In sacred geometry, the Vessica Piscis is where creation begins the first day, when the divine compass draws the first circle, then intersects it with a second. That almond-shaped space between them becomes the template for all forms, from the human eye to the vulva, making it perhaps the most ancient symbol of generative power. Modern eyes might see just intersecting circles, but our ancestors perceived a living diagram. Alchemists saw it as the meeting of sun and moon, the chemical wedding of opposites. Kabbalists recognized the overlapping spheres of the tree of life within its curves. Even today, the Venn diagram, that staple of math classrooms, unknowingly recreates this primordial symbol every time it maps logical relationships. The Vessica Piscis quietly insists that all divisions are illusions, that every apparent boundary is really a place of sacred encounter. Perhaps most haunting is how this shape appears where we least expect it. The lens of the human eye, focusing light into vision, mirrors its form. The Great Pyramid's dimensions encode Vesica Piscis proportions in the relationship between its height and base. Even the magnetic field surrounding Earth takes this shape during solar storms, as if the planet itself remembers its geometric blueprint. The Vesica Piscis isn't just a symbol humans created, it's a fingerprint we discovered, left by whatever hand designed reality itself. Beneath the soft glow of a museum display case, the Venus of Willendorf rests in her ancient silence, a palm-sized figure with exaggerated curves, carved over 25,000 years ago. She isn't just a fertility idol, she's a manifesto in stone. Her coiled hair spirals like the cycles of the moon, her full hips echoing the swell of harvest grains. This tiny sculpture, unearthed in the Danube Valley, whispers of a time when the divine wasn't towering and distant but intimate, embodied, unmistakably female. Half a world away, in the temples of Çatalhöyük, archaeologists found walls adorned with goddess figures giving birth to bulls, their bodies merging with the earth itself. These weren't just decorations, they were sacred equations, teaching that creation begins in the womb of the feminine. The spiral emerges as her universal signature, etched into Neolithic tombs, painted on Minoan pottery, coiled around Celtic torques. At Newgrange, Ireland's 5,000-year-old passage tomb, the entrance stone swirls with triple spirals, each turn mirroring the path of life, death, and rebirth. The same motif appears in the outstretched arms of the Navajo changing woman, whose myth says she formed the first humans from cornmeal and her own breath. Spirals aren't just shapes, they're the visual rhythm of a truth our ancestors knew deep in their bones. That creation isn't a straight line, but a sacred circling, always returning to her source. Then there's the chalice, not just a cup, but a vessel of wisdom carved into the temples of Malta, cast in Cretan gold, later hidden in medieval Grail legends. The ancient Egyptians knew it as the Menet, the bowl of Isis that held the Nile's lifeblood. In India, it became the Kamandolu, the wandering ascetic's water pot that symbolized the universe's unspilled potential. Even the humble beehive, revered from Delphi to Denmark, echoed this symbol. The queen's hive, a living chalice where sweetness and order were born from chaos. These vessels weren't passive containers, they were active metaphors for the feminine as the keeper of mysteries, the one who transforms raw elements into nourishment. The throne glyph of Isis tells another layer of the story. Etched into temple walls along the Nile, it's a simple shape, a seat with a backrest, yet it held multitudes. When a pharaoh's name was written atop this glyph, it didn't just mean he ruled, it meant he ruled through her, drawing legitimacy from the goddess's enduring authority. Even in cultures where male gods rose to prominence, traces of her remained. Athena's olive tree sprouting on the Acropolis, Demeter's torchlight cutting through the underworld's gloom. These weren't afterthoughts, but stubborn reminders of an older order. What's haunting is how these symbols persist in the unlikeliest places. The labyrinth's winding path, walked by medieval pilgrims seeking the Virgin's grace, mirrors the spiral's ancient turns. The rose windows of Gothic cathedrals, exploding with petaled light, echo the chalice's form. Even modern science unwittingly honors her. The double helix, that twisting ladder of life, carries the same coiled wisdom as the goddess's oldest symbols. Perhaps that's why they endure not as relics but as reminders. beneath the layers of history, in the quiet language of shape and form, the divine feminine still speaks. And if we lean close enough, we might just hear what she's been saying all along. The Ouroboros slithers through time, its tail clamped firmly in its jaws, an ancient paradox carved into temple walls and whispered in alchemical texts. In the dim corridors of an Egyptian tomb, this serpent coils around the sun god Ra, its endless loop mirroring his nightly journey through the underworld only to be reborn at dawn. Half a world away, Norse skalds wove tales of Jörmungandr, the world serpent so vast it encircled Midgard, its self-devouring body marking the boundary between order and chaos. Even in Greece, where philosophers pondered eternity, the Ouroboros appeared on Cleopatra's treatises not as myth, but as science, illustrating Aristotle's belief in the universe's cyclical nature. What's startling isn't just the symbol's persistence across cultures, but how each civilization imbued it with near-identical meaning, a reminder that destruction and creation are two sides of the same coin. Alchemists didn't just adopt the Ouroboros, they dissected it. In the Chrysopoeia of Cleopatra, the serpent curls around the words, "One is all." Its black and white halves representing the union of opposites Mercury and sulfur, moon and sun, dissolution and coagulation. When medieval adepts like Zosimos of Panopolis sketched the serpent swallowing itself, they weren't doodling, they were mapping the great work's core truth, that every ending contains the seed of its own renewal. The green lion devouring the sun, the phoenix rising from ashes, these were variations on the Ouroboros theme, each echoing nature's relentless recycling of matter and spirit. Yet the serpent's true power lies in its simplicity. Unlike complex mandalas or intricate glyphs, the Ouroboros reduces cosmic truth to a single, unbroken line. Psychologist Carl Jung saw it as the ultimate archetype of the self, the psyche's drive to reconcile opposites and achieve wholeness. Modern physicists might call it a metaphor for entropy and regeneration, the universe expanding and contracting in an eternal loop. Even children grasp its lesson instinctively, spinning in circles until they collapse laughing, only to rise and spin again. The most haunting iterations appear where we least expect them. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Korlo, or wheel of existence, often features a serpent biting its tail, framing the cycle of samsara. Aztec carvings show Quetzalcoatl as a feathered Ouroboros, his scales marking the days of the sacred calendar. Even the double helix of DNA, with its ladder-like rungs, forms a kind of molecular Ouroboros, life's blueprint twisted into a self-referential spiral. These aren't coincidences, they're proof that certain shapes vibrate at the frequency of human understanding. What the Ouroboros whispers isn't just about cycles, but about the courage to embrace them. Every culture that revered this symbol faced mortality, famine, and decay, yet they chose to inscribe hope in the serpent's endless feast. To draw an Ouroboros isn't to surrender to fate, but to acknowledge the terrifying beauty of a universe that remakes itself endlessly. The ink may fade, the stone may crumble, but the idea endures. Somewhere, always, a serpent is swallowing its tail, and the world begins again. Astrology's symbols didn't just map the stars, they cracked open the sky's secret language. Picture a Babylonian priest tracing his finger across a clay tablet under the desert night, marking the precise moment Jupiter crossed into Pisces. To him, this wasn't just astronomy, it was divine stenography. The zodiac's 12 signs began as celestial shorthand, Aries' ram horns symbolizing spring's explosive energy, Scorpio's stinger embodying autumn's lethal transformation. Even the planets bore glyphs that doubled as sacred emblems, Mars' spear and shield mirroring the god of war's unyielding aggression, Venus' hand mirror reflecting love's intoxicating vanity. These weren't arbitrary doodles, they were cryptographic keys designed to translate cosmic movements into human meaning. The genius lies in how these symbols compress whole mythologies into single strokes. Taurus Bull isn't just a constellation, it's the storm god Adad charging through the heavens, his horns goring the fabric of fate. Mercury's winged Caduceus doesn't merely represent speed, it carries Hermes' role as messenger between gods and mortals, a reminder that some truths move too fast for mortal tongues. Astrologers didn't invent these connections, they observed them, noting how Saturn's slow, grinding orbit mirrored time's relentless march, or how the moon's phases synced with women's cycles long before science explained why. The symbols became a bridge, turning celestial mechanics into a dialogue with the divine. Modern horoscopes may seem like pop culture fluff, but their roots run deep. When a newspaper lists Libra's forecast for harmony, it's echoing the Babylonians' belief that Venus' autumn position softened hearts, an astrocartography map showing where Jupiter's influence peaks. That's just high-tech version of ancient astrologers marking lucky cities under benefic stars. Even skeptics can't deny the symbol's enduring power. Why else would NASA, a Voyager golden record, include zodiac constellations as universal landmarks? What's haunting is how these glyphs transcend eras. A medieval monk casting a natal chart used the same Mars symbol as a modern app, proving some codes refuse to die. The zodiac's animals still prowl our collective imagination, from Wall Street's bullish markets to horror films invoking Scorpio's venom. Perhaps that's the ultimate lesson. Whether you read your horoscope for fun or fervently track retrogrades, these symbols persist because they tap into an ancient truth. The sky doesn't just hang above us, it speaks in a language of shapes that have guided humanity since we first looked up and wondered who was looking back. The periodic table hides a secret its elements whisper in the language of alchemists. That female sign symbol for copper, that's Venus' mirror, borrowed straight from medieval laboratories where metals were thought to grow like plants under planetary influence. Mercury's isn't just a scientific abbreviation, it's the caduceus of Hermes, the god who bridged heaven and earth. Even Iron's male sign carries the ghost of Mars' shield and spear, a nod to its role in forging weapons across millennia. These aren't arbitrary choices. When 18th century chemists needed symbols, they reached back to the very glyphs once scratched into alembics and grimoires, uniting modern labs with ancient quests to decode creation's blueprint. Consider the atomic model electrons whirling around a nucleus like miniature planets. It's the Ouroboros reborn, not as a snake eating its tail, but as energy perpetually recycling itself. Niels Bohr's groundbreaking diagram didn't just revolutionize physics, it echoed the alchemical axiom as above, so below, revealing that the cosmos repeats its patterns from galaxies to atoms. Even quantum entanglements, spooky action at a distance, would have made sense to Renaissance adepts who believed in sympathetic magic, where distant objects shared invisible bonds. Then there's the recycling symbol, three arrows chasing each other in an eternal triangle. At first glance, it's purely pragmatic, a call to reuse resources. But trace its lineage, and you'll find the Triskelion of Celtic lore, the triple spiral of Neolithic tombs, the holy trinities of countless faiths. Modern environmentalists might not chant incantations, but when they stamp this symbol on bins, they're participating in the same cyclical worldview that once inspired druids and mystics. The materials change, but the mandala remains. Laboratory warning signs continue the tradition. The biohazard symbol's trefoil arches mimic the triskels found on Viking runestones, both serving as barriers against unseen forces. Radiation's three-bladed design mirrors the Hindu trisula, Shiva's trident that destroys to regenerate. It's as if science, when faced with primal dangers, instinctively reaches for the oldest protective sigils in our collective memory. What's astonishing isn't just that these symbols survived, it's how they've evolved. That sign, now ubiquitous in emails, began as alchemical shorthand for amphora, a unit of measurement. The Bluetooth logo, a bind rune merging the runes of Harold Bluetooth's initials. Even the heart symbol red, divorced from its anatomical accuracy, persists as a glyph of emotion because some shapes transcend their origins to become universal language. This continuity reveals a profound truth. Beneath the veneer of technology, humanity still thinks in symbols. The smartphone in your palm is just the latest iteration of the shaman's talisman, both designed to connect us to something greater. The alchemist sought the philosopher's stone to transform base metals into gold. Today's scientists chase quantum leaps to transform information into energy. The tools have changed, but the longing remains, to crack the code of existence one symbol at a time. The Rongorongo script of Easter Island stares back at us from wooden tablets like a half-remembered dream. Carved in alternating directions using shark teeth and obsidian, its glyphs of crouching figures, crescent moons, and strange plants follow rhythmic patterns, yet their meaning dissolves just beyond our grasp. Some scholars see genealogical records in the repeating sequences. Others detect creation myths or astronomical charts. But what chills the spine is how these symbols mirror petroglyphs found thousands of miles away in Polynesia, as if the ocean itself carried fragments of a forgotten sacred language. The islanders called the tablets Kohau Rongorongo, lines of recitation, and guarded them fiercely even after their civilization collapsed. When European missionaries burned most in the 1860s as pagan artifacts, a few elders reportedly wept not for the wood, but for the voices trapped inside, now silenced forever. Equally enigmatic are the Vinca symbols, scratched into clay across the Balkans over 7,000 years ago. These angular marks, crosses, zigzags, branching lines predate Sumerian cuneiform by millennia. At first glance, they resemble simple property markers or potter's signatures, but their precise repetition at sacred sites suggests something deeper. A double axe symbol appears near burial grounds, while spiral motifs cluster around fertility shrines. Archaeologist Marija Gimbutas believed they encoded a language of the goddess, a matriarchal world you later erased by patriarchal invaders. Whether proto-writing or sacred sigils, their persistence across generations hints at a shared symbolic vocabulary, one that may have connected Neolithic villages in a spiritual network long before roads or writing. Then there's the Indus Valley script, its elegant pictographs of fish, jars, and stick figures taunting linguists from 4,000-year-old seals. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which surrendered their secrets to the Rosetta Stone, these symbols resist every decipherment attempt. Computer analyzers confirm they're structured like language, with recurring sign combinations akin to words. Yet without a bilingual key, they remain as mute as the stone temples they adorned. The most haunting theory comes from researcher Asko Parpola, who noticed the fish glyph's similarity to the Dravidian word for star, suggesting the symbols might encode celestial knowledge, a cosmic codex waiting for its Champollion. What unites these lost scripts isn't just their mystery, but their sacred context. The Rapa Nui priests chanted over Rongorongo tablets during the Birdman cult ceremonies. Vinca symbols cluster around altars bearing sacrificial remains. Indus seals depict yogic poses centuries before the Vedas described meditation. These weren't grocery lists or tax records, they were bridges between worlds. When Egyptian hieroglyphs were finally deciphered, they revealed not just historical chronicles, but spells to navigate the afterlife. Who knows what revelations lie trapped in these undeciphered symbols, what prayers, prophecies, or portals they might contain? Recent breakthroughs offer glimmers of hope. AI pattern recognition has identified previously overlooked repetitions in the Vinca corpus. Multispectral imaging has revealed faded Rongo glyphs on tablets once deemed blank. And in 2019, a team using Proto-Elamite cryptographic techniques tentatively linked one Indus sign to a measurement unit. Each fragment recovered feels like tuning into a distant radio frequency, catching static-shrouded whispers of a broadcast we once understood fluently. Perhaps the greatest lesson these silent scripts teach is humility. In our age of information overload, where symbols are reduced to emojis and logos, their enduring enigma reminds us that true symbolic language was never just communication, it was communion. The angular marks our ancestors left weren't meant for casual reading, but for awakening. To decode them fully might require not just linguistic skill, but the lost spiritual frequencies they were designed to transmit. Until then, they remain like stained glass windows from some cosmic cathedral, their light still shining through, even if we've forgotten the stories the colors once told. From the pyramids to petroglyphs, humanity has always sought the divine through symbols. These cryptic marks were more than art, they were active links to gods, cosmos, and our own souls. Though separated by time and space, ancient civilizations shared this symbolic language, suggesting a universal spiritual instinct. Today, we still use emojis and logos, proving our need to encode meaning in marks. What divine messages might we be overlooking in modern symbols? The next time you see an ancient glyph, remember, it's not just a shape, it's a whisper from the gods waiting to be heard. Consider the humble heart emoji, a shape that bears little resemblance to the human organ, yet universally conveys love. Its origins trace back to the ivy leaves of ancient Greek pottery, symbols of Dionysus and eternal passion. Or take the Wi-Fi symbol, those concentric arcs resembling radio waves, they echo the Mesopotamian cuneiform for heaven. A reminder that even our digital age reaches for the intangible. Every corporate logo, every traffic sign, every tattoo etched into skin carries this lineage, the silent conviction that lines and curves can hold the weight of meaning. The ancients knew something we've half forgotten. Symbols operate on a frequency beyond logic. When a monk meditates on a mandala or a sailor traces a protective rune, they're not just engaging in ritual, they're tapping into the brain's oldest wiring. Neuroscience confirms that symbols bypass the analytical mind, speaking directly to the limbic system where emotion and memory intertwine. That's why the Apple logo stirs devotion or the Olympic rings ignite pride, their secular sigils, humming with the same power as an ankh or a cross. But here's the urgent question. If symbols still shape our world, what gods are we unwittingly serving? The dollar signs entwined snakes echo the caduceus of Hermes, god of commerce. The recycling symbol's three arrows mimic the triskelion of Celtic rebirth. Even the power button, a circle bisected by a line, mirrors the Norse rune for awakening. We've secularized the sacred without realizing it, building cathedrals to brands and scribbling devotionals in hashtags. Perhaps the final lesson from these ancient glyphs is this: symbols don't lose their power when we stop believing, they just transfer it elsewhere. The obelisks of Egypt have become skyscrapers, the oracle bones, algorithm-generated forecasts. Yet the human impulse remains unchanged, to press our fingertips against the unknown and leave a mark that says, "I was here." I wondered, I reached. The next time you absent-mindedly tap a heart icon or pause before a street mural, listen closely. That shiver down your spine isn't just déjà vu, it's the echo of 1,000 generations whispering back.